Hello and welcome to this week's presentation by Hendricks Wealth and Estate Management. Today's topic is using estate planning as a tax reduction strategy. I am your host, Sean Hendricks, and today we will be talking about a few different ways that we can use estate planning to help you limit tax liability for your estate or for your beneficiaries. Now, I am a licensed attorney. I'm also a financial advisor. So I do have a law license. I've passed the Series 7 and Series 65 exams. And today I like to joke that we're going to be talking there is a joke that says, only two things in life are certain: death and taxes, right? Well, in talking about estate planning and in talking about tax mitigation, we're actually going to be talking about both of those things today. So, nice, bright, sunny topics of death and taxes for today's presentation. Uh, so, one of my favorite questions that I get when I tell people what I do for a living is it's almost always at a presentation I'll get, well, is there any type of trust that lets me never have to pay taxes again? And as much as I wish that were true, unfortunately, no. There is no magic trust that exempts you from taxes. Otherwise, everyone would probably have one. However, there are some tax smart things that you can do and some tax smart estate planning strategies that you can use to save some pretty serious taxes for your estate or your beneficiaries. And we're going to talk about those today. And we're going to kind of break the discussion into taxes in those two groups. So, when I talk about the different types of taxes that we're going to discuss here today, estate taxes, also known as death taxes, when I'm talking about these types of taxes, these are the taxes that are paid by the estate after a person dies. The other type of taxes that we're going to be discussing today are what I will call beneficiary taxes. Those are the types of taxes that are actually paid by the beneficiaries after they inherit something from the estate. And a really good example of this is like when somebody inherits, a pre-tax IRA. The beneficiary actually has to pay tax on that after they receive it when they take money out of it. So we're going to break it down into those two groups, and there's even some subheadings that we're going to talk about. But I'd like to give an example of both of those types of taxes. And since I'm an Illinois attorney, I like to talk about Illinois law. But in Illinois, if a single person dies with a total estate valued over $4 million, their estate is subject to Illinois estate taxes. If the estate's worth over $15 million, the estate must pay federal estate taxes. So these are actually taxes that are paid by the estate before the estate pays out to the ultimate beneficiaries. And there's two operative limitations there. There's the Illinois one, and then there's the federal one. So even if you're watching this in a state outside of Illinois, you still have to consider the federal amount, or some other states have laws like this as well. So estate taxes paid by the estate. The other type, beneficiary taxes, and I alluded to this a moment ago, is that when a person inherits a traditional IRA, the inherited IRA think of it like a big bucket full of pre-tax dollars. The person who receives a share of that IRA will have to pay income taxes at ordinary income tax rates when they take distributions from that inherited IRA. So those are just two really good examples of the two different groups of taxes that we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start off by talking about estate taxes, right? And one of the main strategies that we can use for estate tax planning is what I like to refer to as maximizing exemptions. And I just spoke a minute ago about like the Illinois exemption or the federal exemption amount, that $4 and $15 million amount. And the way that you can maximize exemptions for married couples is that you create what's known as a bypass trust, or sometimes called a bypass marital trust. This is a type of trust that holds the maximum exemption amount for the first spouse who passes away. Income in the bypass trust is paid to the surviving spouse. So the trust that you create pays out income periodically to the surviving spouse, but that principal amount is held in the bypass trust. When the surviving spouse passes away, the estate is then passed on the beneficiaries, and you've preserved the two different exemption amounts for both spouses. And we'll talk about that a little bit more because it's a complex concept. One of the other estate planning strategies that I like to use is gifting. Now, most people are familiar, at least generally, with the concept of gifting. when it comes to an estate, but it's being able to give amounts to people who would otherwise be your beneficiaries while you're still living. And therefore, once you get it out of your estate while you're still alive, it's not then subject to the estate tax that exists upon your passing. Okay. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth too. So for the Illinois exemption, I like to give an example that helps to explain how it actually works. And in this, we're going to use a hypothetical of a $6 million estate. Okay. Now, this would be a married couple with a $6 million estate. If they did not have an estate plan in place, upon the passing of the first spouse, the entire estate would pass directly to the surviving spouse. This is the marital exemption, where you can pass an unlimited amount to your spouse. When the second spouse passes away, the total estate is valued at $6 million because everything went into that surviving spouse's bucket. Because $6 million is over the $4 million exemption, the entire estate is subject to estate taxes, and the estate could owe as much as $456,000 in Illinois estate taxes, at least under the current laws. Okay, with a bypass trust, when the first spouse passes away, instead of having the whole estate go to the surviving spouse, we could create this bypass trust and put $4 million of the estate into it. That preserves that $4 million exemption for that first spouse. Upon the passing of the second spouse, the remaining estate amount, which in this hypothetical will be $2 million, that $2 million is now below the $4 million threshold, and that can pass to the beneficiaries. This would result in zero estate taxes being owed. So this has some teeth, and it can save your estate some really serious money. So when your estate is over any estate tax threshold, it is good to talk about strategic planning on how to potentially mitigate those estate taxes. The other thing I mentioned a couple minutes ago is gifting strategies. Now, gifting is a great way to get assets out of your estate before estate taxes are calculated. And the logic behind gifting is if somebody's going to inherit something anyway, and you know they're going to inherit it anyway, you can gift to them while you're still alive. That gets it out of your estate. And then, so you're saving that money. You're saving potential taxes on those gifts, because why make them subject to estate taxes if you know who's getting it already? And so for what I like to call direct gifting, you can give $19,000 per person per year to anyone you want without utilizing your lifetime exemption amount. That $19,000 amount can change from year to year, so that's just for this year. But in an example for this year, let's say a married couple wanted to give $38,000 to each of their 3 children, right? And the reason it's $38,000 is because each spouse that can give, so that's 19,000 times 2 equals 38. 38,000 goes to each of their 3 children. So for $114,000 total, it could reduce their estate taxes by $18,240 for an estate that's taxed at an estate tax rate of 16%. So that's a lot of money, just for giving it in advance instead of waiting and making it subject to estate taxes. Another way you can use gifting to your advantage is, instead of giving directly to people, you can also give to charity. So if you already have charitable intentions and you want to give to charities that are qualified charities, like 501c3 charities, then those types of gifts are typically 100% deductible for estate tax purposes. So if you're going to give anyway, or you're thinking about giving anyway, giving to charity can reduce your total taxable estate. Now, there's lots of different ways you can do this. You can make gifts directly. You can use specialized types of trusts called charitable remainder trusts or charitable lead trusts. And these are a great way to use irrevocable trusts to provide income to beneficiaries. That would be a charitable remainder trust. Or to the charity itself, you can provide income to the charity. That's called a charitable lead trust. The estate can also get a deduction for amounts that went to the charity. So if you're interested in this, we've actually done a whole presentation just about these different types of trusts in the past. So I'm not going to focus a lot about these today. But if you look on our website and you go into some of the prior presentations, we've talked a lot about some of these things. But these are just more examples of great ways to use trusts to give to charity. Now, you don't necessarily have to use an irrevocable trust is not only for charity. You can actually use an irrevocable trust for gifting for your beneficiaries as well. And one of the trusts that we can use for this is something known as an intentionally defective grantor trust. This is a type of irrevocable trust where you make a gift to it during your lifetime. Now, you can either gift the $19,000 per person amount, and that doesn't count towards your lifetime exemption, or if you go above $19,000 per person, you might intentionally use up some of your lifetime exemption amount, like the allowance amount, like either that 4 or 15 million. But sometimes there's a strategic reason for doing that, and that's what this second paragraph here is really all about. If a person puts $1 million into an irrevocable trust, they might use up $1 million worth of their lifetime exemption amount. But if that 1 million grew to 2 million, they would be passing on $2 million, but they would only have used 1 million of their lifetime exemption. So that's $1 million that otherwise would have been subject to estate taxes that you've exempted by strategically using your exemptions and working with a financial advisor and possibly an attorney to make sure that happens. So one of my favorite trusts that can do that is known as an intentionally defective grantor trust. Don't let the word defective fool you. It's not defective for its purpose of trying to save you money. That's just, it's named that way because of the way that it's taxed. And it's intentionally taxed in a way that allows you to do this. So, we just spent time talking about estate strategies, right? Trying to save the estate money. We are also going to spend a couple minutes talking about strategies that can save your beneficiaries money. So once assets have been passed on to beneficiaries, there are ways that we can plan for that strategically so that the beneficiaries might have to pay less in taxes. And two of the methods that I really like to talk about, and these are not entry-level methods, these are fairly advanced, but they can be very powerful. The two methods are, first I like to talk about is called beneficiary tax planning. And then the second method I like to talk about is managing the step-up in basis. So the first one, beneficiary tax planning. The example that I like to give, and the most straightforward example I can give, is imagine that you have two beneficiaries, right? You need at least two. You can have more than two, but you need at least two. If you have two beneficiaries where one is a high earner and the other is a more modest earner, then that high earner is generally going to be taxed at a higher tax bracket. The modest earner is going to be taxed at a lower tax bracket. So why not think strategically and leave more of the pre-tax assets, like a traditional pre-tax IRA, to the person in the lower bracket, and then leave more of the tax-advantaged assets, like a Roth IRA, or assets that get a step up in basis upon death, like proceeds from the sale of a house, to the higher earner. So what we're really doing is we're allocating more pre-tax assets to a person in a lower bracket, and we're allocating more after-tax or tax-advantaged assets for the person in the higher bracket. The results of that is that the beneficiaries overall would pay less in taxes, and they would keep more as a result. So trusts can help with this strategy. They can help to make sure that the trust has clauses in it that can help balance things so that when you use IRA assets and you allocate them one way, you can use the trust to help you allocate another way. The second method, and again, this is fairly advanced because it necessarily involves using an irrevocable trust, but certain types of irrevocable trusts have a unique power. They allow the person who created the trust, who's also known as the grantor, to swap assets of equal value into or out of the trust. So even though the trust itself is irrevocable, assets in the trust can sometimes be traded and exchanged as long as they have equal value. So if a person creates an irrevocable trust with this swap power, and that person puts assets into that trust that they want to grow, so think like securities, for example, would be a good example of things that you want to grow. Later in life, when, hopefully if the securities have grown in value, they can take something that's outside of the trust, and they can swap an asset into the trust and take out an equivalent value from out of the trust. So why would you want to do that? And the answer is cost basis. Okay, they can take something that has a present day cost basis or a relatively low cost basis, something that's equal to even, and they can swap that with something in the trust that has a relatively high cost basis. So they can swap out something, swap back in something else. And the result of that is that when somebody inherits those things, the things that are outside this trust get a step up in cost basis. The things that are inside the trust don't. So the beneficiaries that receive that would pay less in capital gains potentially, because they get the assets, they get that step up in basis, and so they get to keep more money that way. That's a fairly advanced strategy, and it requires a special type of trust. But for those people for whom it works, it can be a really great way. And a lot of times the beneficiaries might not even understand why you did it until they see the benefit of it. And then they think, oh, thanks, mom and dad, or thanks, grandma and grandpa, you did something really smart. And I see now why you did it, and it saved potential tax money. So those two types of mitigation strategies, both for estates and beneficiaries, we just gave a couple of examples today with the time constraints that we have. But it illustrates this point that most people think of estate planning as really just a set of instructions, that here's what to do with my stuff after I pass away. And at its most basic level, that's what estate planning is. However, if you want to think more strategically about it, there's a real opportunity there to use strategies that operate within the tax laws to position assets certain ways to make them less taxable. And I like to say that's more like playing it's more like playing chess than checkers, right? You're really thinking strategically about all the different parts of your estate and how those parts of your estate interact with the tax laws. So here at Hendricks Wealth and Estate Management, we're always thinking about different ways that we can use the laws and use the taxable nature of assets to try to benefit our clients and their families. So this is just a couple of examples. We try to apply these same strategies or the same thought process to when we work with clients in lots of different ways. So if you want to learn more, please remember our slogan, when you're ready, we're ready. We'd be happy to talk to you about those things. So I'm going to check I'm going to make sure there's any Q&A. I don't see that there's any questions yet. So if any attendees have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A portal on the screen that you have there. And I'll give it a minute or two, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If you do not have any questions, or if there are no questions, you can always, or if you're like me and you think of a question afterwards, you can always email us at info@hendrickswealth.com. You can call us on our main phone number for the Illinois office, 847-428-3997. You can call us at our Florida office at 941-308-9862. And or just visit our website, www.hendrickswealth.com. This will also be presented in several formats, and it will be saved on the events tab of our website. So if you want to view this content or other content that we've shared, please feel free to look at that part of our website as well. I don't see any comments. I don't see any questions that have come through. So if it's a speak now or forever hold your peace, if you have nothing else if you have no questions to ask, then I will be moving on. Please note that we do these presentations every week. So if you found this informative or helpful, please again check out hendrickswealth.com/events. The next couple of presentations, we've got a couple of interesting ones coming up. Next week, my colleague Tom Anderson will be presenting on subject matter that is called Beyond the 401k, 7 retirement planning decisions that can shape your future. And then the following week, we will have a guest speaker, Luke Coogan from Columbia Threadneedle. We'll be talking about technology investing and is AI worth the hype? So for all the information and all the questions swirling about AI, we're going to have a guest speaker talking about some of those topics as well. So we certainly hope you join us for those as well. And otherwise, thank you very much for attending. And I hope to hear from each and every one of you. And if you have any questions at all, or if I can be of further assistance, please feel free to reach out. Thank you very much, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.